Manufacturing is like a bullet through a gun. You can take a year to line that shot up, but once you pull the trigger, it's going all the way through.
Can you define for me what you mean by industrialized construction and how mass timber is playing into it?
Industrialized construction is an umbrella term that I use. It's really involves practices that have been developed in manufacturing and have a long pedigree in manufacturing that have increasingly come over to the construction space, largely to respond to the need to improve productivity. And these practices range everything from, lean construction and pull planning to panelized, volumetric, and modular assemblies, increasingly larger and larger, more complex assemblies that reduce time on site, improve the efficiency, and more than anything, I think, increase the reliability of the construction sector. That's really kind of what we're after in IC. So my name is Fouad Khalil. I'm the principal and founder of Modley. We are industrialized construction consultancy. We've been around for over 5 years now and are involved with industrialized construction programs really across the board, from medical to housing. Prior to that, I was involved in a number of industrialized construction deployments, really both as a designer and a vendor of IC buildings. And that's really been an interest of mine for over 15 years, whether it's through unitized facades, which is kind of where I got started, and then into modular housing and volumetric, and then through really everything from kits of parts to volumetric deliveries over the last 15 years. So that's been really my main focus, but I'm also a registered architect and continue to practice architecture where it makes sense with the focus on industrialized construction.
Well, it's great to have you, Fu. I'm excited to kind of dive into the industrialized construction space, like specifically tying in with mass timber. We're going to get into like lessons that you've learned over your numerous projects, where you see the market kind of going and how people can be successful. I know you've got a big list of lessons learned and best practices, and we're going to get into that. Before we do, though, can you define for me what you mean by industrialized construction and how mass timber is playing into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Industrialized construction is an umbrella term that I use. It's really involves practices that have been developed in manufacturing and have a long pedigree in manufacturing that have, increasingly come over to the construction space, largely to respond to the need to improve productivity. And these practices range everything from, lean construction and pull planning to panelized, volumetric, and modular assemblies, increasingly larger and larger, more complex assemblies that reduce time on site, improve the efficiency, and more than anything, I think, increase the reliability of the construction sector. That's really kind of what we're after in IC.
And who is IC really for? Like, is it a specific geography? Is it a specific asset class? Like, who benefits the most from taking an IC approach?
Yeah, so the main thing that really starts to unlock industrialized construction is standardization. And standardization isn't really anything new to construction. We've seen emphasis on standardization over the years, depending on availability and scarcity of things like labor capital and materials. But really, it's taking that. It's. I think what's really driving this phase of it. It's being able to use standardization and some of the technology we've seen in building information modeling and computerization and robotics, and then bundling that together into assemblies that can help control costs and improve speed on site. A lot of our costs are actually because we spend so much time on site. So anything we do to reduce that really helps. But, really being driven by the availability of technology that's becoming cheaper, easier to use, whether it's manufacturing technology or building information modeling or reality capture. All those things are really helping kind of stabilize this manufacturing type of industrialized mindset and driving that onto building projects.
Got it. And so I heard you talk about cost, certainty. What about labor?
Yeah, I mean, labor right now is the big story, right? So, we've already got going into this period, we're still really in the post 2008 era where we saw a reduction in the amount of available labor. And that's primarily because the boomers are aging out. The financial crisis in '08 helped drive them more out of the industry. And we haven't been able to replace that workforce, which was really experienced and skilled with enough new recruits into the sector. And then the other thing that's happening at the same time is we're seeing a lot of pressure on the construction industry due to immigration, right? So that's pulling labor out. We're a long ways off of allowing of getting that labor resource or back up to speed. The other thing that's happening is we're making huge investments in things like data and energy. And those are segments of the construction that most people don't see and feel. So when you're talking about housing or commercial or hospitality, right? Less labor overall is available because these big industrial projects are actually becoming a magnet for the labor that is left. So you really got pressures all over the place with respect to labor. And that's something that uh, we're, you need industrialized construction to manage because it helps you put the labor where you need it and reduce the amount of labor everywhere else, right? You can centralize the production of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing assembly in a plant. You can have your skilled guys there. They're working every day. They're not wasting time looking for stuff on site. And then you're taking that value added part, driving it to site where it can be installed by less skilled labor, and so you're able to manage this labor issue more effectively using these techniques than without them.
Are you seeing on the labor side of things? So we talked about like holistic economy level labor shortages or maybe like redirection of the existing smaller labor pool now. Is there certain like geographic areas, like maybe like mountain towns, high cost of living areas that are seeing more of that, both on like the decrease of supplies labor side, but also on the increase of like we need more housing, we have less laborers, and it's kind of like the conjunction of those two. Is that like a sweet spot for prefab modular IC stuff?
Yeah, I would think that, areas like the Mountain West, which continue to see, a lot of growth, population growth coming in for so many different reasons, people moving out of, say, the West Coast into the mountain areas. Also, you have just people want to be there. There's a natural demographic shift, and they had a labor pool issue before. That's like the perfect storm for, hey, how do we start thinking out of the box? And we still want to be able to respond to demand. Can we do something at the state level? Can we do something at the corporate level? There's all kinds of interest right now on how we can meet this. If you can figure this out, really be of value and benefit to your community, right? To your state or region. To get this right. So, and that's happening, I think, across the board. But I would say the Mountain West being really well capitalized and well positioned for this makes a lot of sense. Um, there's high growth markets in the Midwest. Also, there's high growth regions, all over the country that are more and more looking at this.
That makes sense.
Um,
So we talked about like, well, what is industrialized construction? Who's it for? And kind of the benefits of getting this right for the developer owner specifically. Assuming everybody's on board with this approach, what do they need to know to be successful on site, pre-planning, post, et cetera? Like, what are like the main things that if you get this wrong, all those benefits and promises go away?
yeah, it's really hard. So the first thing I want to say is if you're in mass timber, I think by definition, you're working with industrialized construction. Okay. Mass timber is a processed material. It's highly engineered. You can, it's dimensionally very accurate. It uses computer controls to develop the product. You can mill in all sorts of features and options into it that make it easier to install, that make it more responsive. So you're already dealing with an industrialized construction product. You've got a plant you're talking to, and you need to make sure that the deliveries that you need are synchronized with the production plant. And you're doing that on a very direct basis. It's not like you're just going to your local hardware store and buying the stuff off the shelf. It's all built to suit. So right there, you're in the industrialized construction sort of paradigm, right? And so a lot of what you see in industrialized construction, especially with respect to housing, involves a lot more pre-planning and handling in order to kind of capture that value and not have it dissipate on you because you didn't plan your site work. And now instead of being ahead, you're watching those schedule gains erode. You're seeing added costs due to things like double handling and storage that was unexpected and you didn't know about or you didn't plan for at the outset or you didn't negotiate, those kinds of things. So when you're driving, I mean, a lot of what we talk about in manufacturing is, you know, manufacturing is like a bullet through a gun. You can take a year to line that shot up, but once you pull the trigger, it's going all the way through, right? And that momentum, that kind of mindset is really what you need on site. And that's the part that we have trouble with in construction. We're not used to that really highly planned, highly efficient operation on site. We need to build in a lot of safeguards and slop in the schedule, et cetera. But you really have to be focused on not having that value dissipate because there was planning that could have been done that wasn't done. So a lot of it involves planning. The other thing that you find is to a much greater degree, you need to be using BIM and you need to be leveraging BIM in all kinds of ways. You need to be including the manufacturing information from the manufacturer into your BIM model. You should be using the BIM model to do things like scheduling and staging and crane operations and planning, right? All that matters. If you lose hours because your crane was positioned inefficiently, well, you're going to see more cost than you wanted. That's taking technical coordination to a higher level than a lot of developers are used to asking for. And so what we're trying to do right now is educate the developer and owner community on these are the things we need you to try to include when you're talking to your contractor or you're talking to your vendors that you may not be used to, you may not have been exposed to before, but they're going to make the difference for you once you're on site. Um, so I think the first thing is understanding your process payments, your payment milestones, and where that might differ. You may be, for example, involved in direct purchase of some of these materials. There's an opportunity for savings right there in the owner, but there's also you're going to have to manage more of that process than you may be used to. So that's really where I think that's where really where it starts because when it's like an early release package on a commercial project. You're having to buy your steel early, you're having to buy your precast early, and you may not be used to doing that if you're doing wood stick frame, for example, right? So these are some of the things where you'll see some differences if you're using IC, at least in the beginning.
Tell me about that direct purchase in terms of like what would actually be different and things that the developer owner would have to be like, yes, we're nailing down XYZ coordination, milestones, et cetera. Like, let's go deep on that for a second.
Yeah. So with a lot of the suppliers, you're probably ahead of your money if you're going to do, let's just say your plant's booked 6 to 9 months out. And so you may be spending money on engineering deposits and your material deposit advance your close. Okay. So you're already at a stage where you don't have a contractor on board, but you need to secure this material so that it's available to you in 9 months when you're going to be on site or 14 months or whatever it is. That means that you're going to be negotiating your contract terms with that plant directly. That would apply to things like prefab bathrooms and it would apply to things like cross laminated timber panels. Okay. And so, well, you need to think about things like storage fees and try to get a schedule of values for storage fees in case you do need to pull the trigger on storage and understand how much leeway you have. You're going to be looking at receiving. What are the activities you need to make? You should be familiar with the plant. You should be in touch with the key personnel who are managing that. And then you've got to be thinking about logistics. Who's in charge of the deliveries, where the delivery is going, what's the delivery schedule, who's going to receive the product if it's going to a warehouse. Um, and all of that can be done without blowing the budget, but these are really important things you want to do. The other thing I think would be really important is if you're looking at a mass timber project, it would be really helpful to buy out your installer at the same time as you're buying out your panels. So we've got really incredible mass timber installers in the space. They're very familiar with the product. They know all the suppliers. They know how they want the panels delivered, what the construction sequence ought to be. And that's really early phase activity where, I mean, you might still be in completing your CDs for a lot of the building, but you're working on early phase construction sequencing with your installer so that when the panel is made, it's being produced in the order in which it will be installed. And that's why that early phase activity is really key. You want to handle those panels as few times as possible. So that means basically they're going to build it in the reverse order that you're going to use it. So those are things that you may not have accounted for. Who is going to be the installer? Can we get some proposals for them? Can we have them work with the plant and us together? We're going to be working on an install sequence pretty early, way earlier than we think we need to. But in fact, that's really the way to capture the value. And now we've got our panel and our installer coordinated and we're ready to go. And we're just filling in the other stuff around it that we have more time to design or play with.
Give me the hard bottom line benefits to a developer by doing this. So like let's say they're purchasing direct. Like what's the project budget percentage that they're potentially saving by doing these extra steps and doing them early?
Yeah. I don't know if I could say, well, this is going to save you 15%. It's pretty hard to say because it has more to do with how big is the project? What's the overall value of the structural frame relative to the rest of the build out? There's a lot that goes into there, but I think all of this really works to your advantage if you're planning to be doing this repeatedly and at scale. You as an organization will get better at it. You will see savings opportunities by virtue of being in practice, like having the resources in house or the consultant relationships where this is not an issue for you. You've learned a couple of lessons along the way. You plan to be continuing to use CLT, for example, in your portfolio over the long term. It's really that kind of long-term benefit to you as a developer or as a potentially as a contractor that you need the specialized expertise because you've made a commitment to use this material over the long term. Beyond that, I wouldn't want to quantify. What I will say is within industrialized construction broadly, the organizations that have targeted this method and embraced it are looking at, broadly speaking, 10 to 15% savings on cost and 10 to 15% savings on schedule over the long term and sustained. And we can look to some of the larger organizations in medical, for example, that have been working with industrialized construction now for over a decade. They're publishing those kinds of numbers and it is worthwhile for them. I think you could, in certain cases, radically even improve on top of that, but that's a pretty conservative measure. I mean, these folks publish, they're big companies and they want to be very confident in what they're publishing. I'd say that's in the ballpark. And we've seen that, for example, on a CLT project where we've been able to really detail with the supplier of the CLT, we've saved 10% on the cost of the fiber order through the early planning and coordination of the buyout and of the design.
And the reason I asked to like put some numbers behind it is like 10, 15%, even if you go on the low, even if it's half, even though it's 5%, that's still a huge chunk of the overall project cost that you're able to save. And especially when you're talking about if the going stereotype, for lack of a better word, of like, hey, you want to build green, you want to build sustainably, you want to do this prefab, it's going to cost you 2% more. Well, not necessarily, right? Because if you're doing the systems that you're proposing and advocating for, it's like, no, you can actually cut that in the other direction by 5 to 15%, right? And so I understand there's compounding effects, like the more you fold this into your portfolio. And that's just why I want to like emphasize, like, this isn't a go IC, spend a little bit more, get a better product. It's get IC right, get a better product, and save money. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And but I would caveat that heavily in that when you're talking about industrialized construction, it's really an end-to-end model. It really starts from the capital raise and it runs all the way through operations. And where you lose value it's in the transition between the links on that chain. So when you go from design to manufacturing, manufacturing to logistics, logistics to construction, every time you hand off that IC package, that's an opportunity for loss of value, right? And so to think that you buy the widget and you've locked in the savings and construction's going to do what construction's going to do, you're setting yourself up for failure. You've got to be tracking that all the way through the process to the very, very end. And I think that's one mistake people make is they think that because they spend a lot of time early on in prototyping and getting the product right, and then forget that, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen on site in order to capture and realize all that value, or they maybe they don't think that, but sometimes they don't put enough emphasis on site operations. That, hey, we've got to behave differently on site with this stuff than we're used to. Let's look at that as a team and understand it really well, just the way we've understood developing the CLT package or designing a pod, right? We've got to look at what's the correlating activity on site that we have to implement because we've done this. For example, that's a big one. And that's going to be different than your conventional build out. It's going to involve more planning. It's going to involve more discipline.
Let's talk about the planning and discipline that has to happen in that handoff to the on-site phase. Like, what's different? What do maybe the GCs need to do differently than they would on a different project? Like, let's get down like granular. Like, these are non-negotiables that your team has to do.
Yeah. So I think starting with the owner, because it always starts with the owner, I think that you're really having to think hard about your front end. So your front end is, your general terms and conditions. You're asking for a proposal or you may be bidding out and you've got instructions for bid or you've got general terms. So there's a lot of things that are more used to happening in commercial or institutional builds that I think need to migrate over into housing. For example, something like a pre-construction conference. In industrialized construction, because you're trying to put your most sensitive, either your superstructure or your MEP components together, that pre-construction conference is going to be a very important thing. You've got to have all of the affected trades together at the table working in an integrated way. Your plumber has to know that the penetrations in the CLT are there to line up with your utilities that are coming in your site package, in your dirt. So the guys that are going to install the utility lines, they have to be aware that they're essentially lining up with a piece of wood that's going to come in that's got a pre-drilled hole for that riser. And so the riser's got to know that it's got to line up. If you're working on a pod and you have a depression in concrete, well, you've got to be able to plan for that edge of slab in a way that you may not be used to. The best way to do that is to qualify your subs if you can, and have a very robust pre-construction and pre-bid conference planning function that makes everybody aware of things they need to understand that are going to be different because you're using IC, because the stuff that you may be locating very sensitively, you won't realize that you're going to need to locate it there for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks later when those panels start to come in and everything has to be lined up, right? Similarly, things like, and the industry is really good about this, your moisture mitigation plan. Okay. Do you have a number in there for additional tarping? Do you have a number in there for measures? What is the plan if we have these storms like we've been having this summer, where it's been a very wet summer? Well, we've got cross laminated timber. We may have pods. We may have millwork on site. How are we protecting that? What's our construction sequence? What's the implication for the construction sequence and trying to get dried in quickly? How are we accelerating that path to dry in for our buildings? How are we protecting the material when it comes out to the site? And what additional measures need to be on? And do we have costs built in for that stuff so nobody's shocked or surprised that we need to spend money? Like those are things that are probably above and beyond what a lot of housing folks are used to. But those are going to be things that make the difference for you. And really, it's not necessarily that you're going to incur those additional costs, but you need to understand what they would be, what might be, and what the risks are.
So it's like, plan for the worst, right? So it's like if it's monsoon season, we don't have monsoons here, but if there's
We
potential,
almost, yeah,
yeah, if there's
yeah.
a tiny fractional percentage potential of rain, like we have to have this built in. Doesn't mean we're going to use it, but we need to make sure it's built in so that in case we do have to use it, things don't go haywire, right?
Yeah. And also, let's make sure that when we're doing this activity, that our project superintendent is available, for example, right? Typically, those guys are, they may be the last to join the team. No, we need to make sure that the actual folks on site are going to be the ones involved in the planning process. So require building owner, require that they furnish who the project staff will be, both at the executive level and at the field level. Give us schedules for them so that we know that they are available for these planning activities. So we're not losing information, right? These are the little details that people might miss in thinking about this, but you got to have the people on site involved in the planning. In pool planning, that's a basic requirement, and that's more of an industrialized construction mindset than, say, a typical conventional.
So we talked about pre-con conferences, pulling all your involved parties together so that everybody's on the same page. We talked about moisture mitigation, storage, protection from weather, that kind of stuff. Did we miss anything like absolutely vital in the on-site handoffs?
Yeah, I would say the third probably leg in that stool is a robust use of building information modeling. Your fabricator's already doing that. Virtually all IC vendors I work with are highly skilled at providing building information products. So you will get an accurate model of your floor panels or your bathroom pods from your vendor. You've got to be using that and integrating that so you have a view of the build out on site as it moves through time. It's gonna involve more, okay, but it pays. And there's a really, I mean, you're already halfway there when you choose to buy from the vendor. He's going to give you a BIM model. Your architect's probably using the BIM model to develop the project anyway. Let's make sure that during the contracting phase, that data continues to be leveraged and enriched to the owner's value. So staging, sequencing, logistics on site, storage, inclement weather scenarios. You've got the information already in your models. Make sure that your team is able to use that throughout. Don't just throw that stuff away the minute we get on site and nobody can look at it anymore. We're all using paper again. I mean, I'm not against paper. I think you use paper and the building information model, right? Not or all of it. As much whatever has the best value, use it. But you've certainly got a lot of investment in building information model that I don't think is being sufficiently levered broadly, especially in lower rise construction. And I do think it makes a big difference.
Got it. So what comes after this phase?
Well, so after this phase, I think you're going to be receiving. So let's just say, okay, we get through. There is often a prototyping phase or an approval phase that you want to be able to do efficiently if you're an owner, and then you're in production. And so, what are your production milestones? How are you ensuring that the milestones and terms are met? You're Somebody is going to that facility and signing off on, looks like we're supposed to have this much product at this level of quality, and we've looked at that product, we've received it, and it checks out. You don't have to have a exhaustive review, but you're going to be verifying that the work's being done. You're going to be verifying things like component labeling. Okay, we're going to be wrapping this stuff up. How is it being labeled? What is the information that the contractor needs to have on those labels? Has that been specified to your supplier? Your supplier is labeling the product. They're labeling the product the way that suits them. Okay. Does that suit your construction team? What does your construction team need to say? Do they need to have additional labels applied on other surfaces? Because the way they're storing them, they may not be able to see the label. Okay. Do they need to have other information beyond just what the supplier needs on that label so they can be efficient in their handling of the material when it's under construction, right? That's one that people don't think about, but it's very important. If you've got to dispatch 2 or 3 extra guys to dig through material that is already wrapped and staged in a warehouse because they can't figure out where the next piece is coming from, that's a problem. And that's an avoidable problem, right? That's one that could be done through just planning it and talking through it. So those are some of the things. And then what is the procedure to quality control and say, do you have a punch list process that you expect your vendor to conform to? So in the case of a volumetric unit, you want to be going through those units, having sign off that they've met standards. You may be looking at things like deficiency reports or non-compliance reports, right, from your manufacturer. Hey, we missed this on this one. We can either ship it to you or ship it out of sequence. Okay, there's a procedure for that, right? Or here's a list of known issues on this delivery. We're going to get it to you on time, but we got a couple of things we want you to be mindful of. Well, understand that that's part of your paperwork that you need to get. The other one would be making sure that whatever is going out of that plant is also being piped into your authorities having jurisdiction. Does your building inspector understand the methodology? Do they understand any compliance paperwork that needs to be filed either with the state or with the city in order to receive that to be okay with it? All of that is part of that self purchase or that direct purchase process, right? You're going to make sure that both it's compliant in terms of your authorities having jurisdiction and any internal controls that you want to see on that product to make sure that you're getting what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
And this is typically this is not something out of the ordinary, but there may be details to it that you will hit or miss depending on the level of expertise that you use, right? Like, so it's not like nobody's used to doing it, but you may require the extra labeling, or you may require another number on the label to make it easier to use. That's the kind of stuff those are the opportunities to get right in a process like that.
so. Understanding that there are differences in this process that are absolutely essential to making the promises and the benefits come true. What do you think the future of IC looks like? Like, who's going to be adopted? Where's the big advantages? And who stands to benefit the most when they get these things right?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest beneficiaries of this will be companies that self-perform any of these key activities on site. So if they're self-performing, they're coordinating, staging, running logistics, they're integrating with other trades. They have some BIM capability. It could be a general contractor that has self-performed crews. I think those guys are, as their expertise grows in these modes, they're going to do well. I think also if they're potentially specialized trades. So one of the interesting things that I've seen over the last 5 years, for example, I've seen electrical outfits develop prefab and industrialized divisions. All of a sudden, they've got a steel shop in there, and they're bringing steel under their roof, for example, and they're building out their own frames and jig and fixtures, and they're also using the steel shop to build their own assemblies. That's really powerful. So, for example, carpenters that are increasingly becoming assemblers of industrialized construction products on site. We use a lot of the carpentry trades to install things like pods. That's been going on for a long time. They can handle that work. They can handle also the work around it, the work involving it. Um, you have carpenters that are basically assembling super frames in a very sophisticated way for mass timber. And I think they're going to find adjacent services that they can then include and bundle, things like bin coordination, things like logistics and handling. Maybe they start also integrating pod installation. Maybe they are getting you to dry in really quickly, and then you're buying out your interior finished packages separately under a separate contract, right? Those types of scenarios where you're breaking up that you're bundling services differently because you're using IC product, and it makes a little bit more sense in that context. And then you're working with companies that are willing to like integrate more easily. I see those kinds of things being big winners. I mean, most of the folks that are installing mass timber panels can read a BIM model directly and can work with a BIM model directly. Now, that's different than just a framing crew. I think that's where we go from here. And also, I think that on the services side, really tightly integrating design and construction, tightly integrating design and manufacturing. You don't have to have like an end-to-end integration or design and development, right? Designer, developer, builder uh, models, right? Where they're integrating broadly on services, but they're really focused on housing, or they're really focused on industrial, or they're really focused on data center, right? And they're gonna consolidate those services so they can move faster, they can be more accurate. I see that happening a lot. I work with an engineering firm very, very closely, where I'm basically under their roof as a project manager more than a designer. But I think those kinds of constellations are going to be what help drive us through, and there'll be new business models built around this, and they'll be more effective at delivering value than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah. No, well, I'm looking forward to seeing how all that plays out because I think you're right. There's a lot of opportunities here for people that are uh, embracing this shift, if you will. Uh, you're working on some pretty exciting projects. You're working on a book. You've written several different white papers, and we'll actually link down below for anybody that's interested. It's a 3-part white paper series on everything that we've talked about that you and your team have put together on real world case study uh, type events. And so, if you guys want that, click the link down below and download Foo's paper. Tell me about the book that you're doing.
Yeah, so I changed the title. It was gonna be, something about operators, and then, I realized that, operating a plant, traditionally that means you're operating a plant, and I don't have a lot to say about operating a manufacturing plant. I am not a manufacturer. I have too much respect for manufacturers to assume anything, but certainly worked with a lot of manufacturers. But really, what I think it's would be really nice is there's a lot of people in the construction industry entering the construction industry, young people, people that have been in it for a long time, are really eager and excited about this. They think modular is just really cool. They want to understand, and there's so much to learn. And I really do think just understanding it holistically really helps. So I've worked in situations where, my guys on the line didn't know what they were building, didn't understand how it was all working out there in the office with where the designers are meeting the clients. They get a set of blueprints and they're like, okay, we're building this now. And whenever I've been able, I think where we've been most successful is in bringing those guys over to the design side and get debriefing them. Hey guys, this is where we are. This is what we think the product's going to do. We want to build in these improvements. We want your feedback early. We're not even done designing it. Uh, Tell us what you think. And then they get excited. They're invested in the process, and they're more aware of what we're trying to achieve. So really, the book's goal is to paint a holistic picture so that somebody that's entering this field, whether they're in a construction trade or they're in a design function or they're in the manufacturing aspect, gets a sense of the whole. So what I'm trying to do is give an overview, or at least an overview of the universe that I see, and how I see works holistically. And maybe you didn't understand this. Maybe you didn't understand why supply chain's so important, or why the purchasing contract's so critical. And because you're working in the field. Well, this is ideally a book that can help you fill in those gaps and just give you a broad uh, uh, overview and knowledge of the whole thing, so that you're able to ask better questions. You're able to be more informed and maybe contribute to, or get into some aspect of it that you didn't know about. That's really the gap I'm trying to fill with the book project.
Maybe I'll make a little landing page because I know it's still in progress. So put together like a little wait list or something like that.
Way in progress, but thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, man.
Yeah.
I've
Way in
learned a lot
progress.
today. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think everybody needs to know?
It's such a cool thing to be in a new, I see it as a new discipline that's opening up before our eyes. That's, it's still wet clay, and it changes all the time. It's evolving, it's challenging, it's really exciting. So all I would say is just stay tuned, watch the space. You guys, with what you guys were doing on mass timber, you can see the evolution in real time. And so that's the only thing, is it's an exciting, I think it's the future of it is the future of construction. I don't think so. I know it is. But we get to author that future together in real time. Nothing is, it's still evolving. There's going to be exciting new business models, exciting new products to come. So just stay tuned, and hopefully, if you can, get engaged, because I think it's a great field.
Great. Well, thanks for chatting with me, man. I guess I think this podcast will come out after the summit, but I will be seeing you in 2.5 weeks.
Yes, very excited. Thanks for having me.